All right, here we go with part 2 of chapter 5, looking at classical China and India. And now I'm going to introduce you to a song that you're going to hear over and over and over until you memorize this because you need to know all of the Chinese dynasties. So we already read about the Shang dynasty and the Zhao dynasty, and the next two that we're going to find out about is the Qin and the Han. So there's this catchy song that I'm going to play for you now, and I want you to hear it, and I want you to sing along, and eventually you're going to know all the dynasties you need to know for AP World History. So here we go.
毛泽东。
All right, so there you have the dynasty song, right? So the Shang, the Zhao, right? Those are the first two. And now we're going to look at the Qin and the Han. And even though it's spelled with a Q, it's pronounced Qin, and that is where we get the name China from. All right, so let's talk about the Warring States period. So the fall of the Zhao, that you see them up here, leads to this like civil war where you have all these different kingdoms fighting each other, each one trying to get the authority, get the power to claim to have the mandate of heaven. And after 200 years of fighting and civil war and violence, we see the Qin, right over here, rise to power, and they start conquering one kingdom after the next, after the next, after the next, until eventually they control the entire region, right? And all of the Chinese territory will fall under one government, and this is called the Qin. So they reunify China into one kingdom, one state, and in fact, it becomes an empire at that point. And the first ruler of the Qin becomes the first Chinese emperor, and this is the guy. His name is Shi Huangdi, right? Literally, it means first emperor. So Shi Huangdi, he is a follower of legalism that you read about. So he creates a strong government, and he expands his borders through conquest. He expands it greater than the Zhao dynasty had. So he goes into the southern parts of China that you see over here, and he starts controlling all of this under his authority. Right. So this is a completely centralized authority government, which was different from the Zhao, which was actually decentralized, right? And this would have been their capital over here. So under the legalist idea, they went out of their way to take away any competition. So for example, remember the Zhao, they were decentralized. The kings would rely on the local rulers or the local lords to run the government on behalf of the king. Well, the emperor, the Qin emperor, said, forget that. I'm going to remove all those lords because those lords might want to one day rise up against me. So he kills them all. And in their place, he puts magistrates. These are government officials who are loyal and work for the emperor. Then China had different laws because different regions of China was ruled by different people, and they had different laws and different customs. And the Qin Dynasty came in and said, forget it. No, there's no more local laws. Everyone has to follow the Imperial Laws, the laws created by the Qin Dynasty. They went out of their way to burn books. They would burn, you see these books. So anything that wasn't either farming or agriculture or war books, like teaching you how to fight, stuff like that, anything else was burned. And the most popular thing to burn was Confucian books, because Confucianism is a philosophy that is not compatible with legalism. And you see how these are what have been what we call the scholar bureaucrats. These are the educated elites in China, and these people would have protested, how dare they burn our books? And if they protested, they probably would have gotten killed. And in fact, they passed a law saying it was illegal to own books. They didn't want people to learn. They didn't want people to question their authority either. And if you did criticize, you start complaining, well, one of the major ways of dealing with people is that they'll send them to the northern parts, right, up here, of the Qin Dynasty, right, the northern parts of the Qin Empire, and they tell them, okay, your job now is going to be build a wall. So imagine you're like a book nerd who's never worked a day in his life because you're upper class, and you criticize the government, and then you spend the rest of your life building a wall, working in extreme temperatures 24/7. And if you died, they'll just throw you inside the wall. That's where you'll be buried. And these networks of walls that the Qin built to defend the Qin borders so that invaders from Central Asia don't come in, they would eventually become what we call the Great Wall of China. Right? And the Great Wall was built over a very long time. But it starts with the Qin. So the Qin also forced people to work in to build stuff like roads. They forced people to provide labor to build stuff. They forced people to fight in the military as a form of payment of taxes. And again, anyone who complained would be forced to work, and they kind of become slaves to the government. So here we see the famous terracotta army that the Qin emperor was buried in. So some of the achievements of the Qin: number one, they expand their territory, so China gets bigger and bigger than ever before. They control more and more land. They built infrastructure like roads and bridges and canals, which makes it easier to transport, which also makes it easier to trade. They standardize the economy, so they say from now on everyone has to use the same money. Right? They use copper coins. Here will be these copper coins. So everyone's using the same coinage, and of course this makes it easier to trade because you know exactly how much something is worth. He standardized the Chinese script, so during the Shang and the Zhao dynasties, there was different versions of what we would call Chinese writing. And then this guy came in and said, forget all those versions. This is the official one. Everyone has to read and write in this language. And that was it. Which made it easier because now all the people in China, the educated ones at least, were able to read and write and communicate no matter where, you know, what part of China they were from. So this is the tomb of the emperor. He was buried with thousands of soldiers made from terracotta, which is a pottery, ceramic. And this was discovered a few decades ago, and it shows us like that this guy had so much power that he could get, you know, thousands of workers to build these tombs and build these, you know, artisans to build these statues, and they're all lifelike, and they're very realistic. And eventually, after his death, the first emperor, right, Shi Huangdi, his son takes over, but his son isn't that good, and his generals rebel against him and they overthrow him, and a new family, a new dynasty takes over called the Han Dynasty. And the fall of the Qin Dynasty, to many people in China, was a relief because these people were very, very strict. They were very cruel, violent. They taxed people. They forced people to work. So when the Han Dynasty comes in and takes over, it makes perfect sense. Hey, you know, these new rulers, they have the mandate. Right, because the previous rulers, the Qin, they were just absolutely horrific people. All right, so next time we'll look at the Qin Dynasty. I mean, the Han Dynasty. The Han.